So this is the first of several videos I'm planning on doing to help people understand that there is a higher power out there, that there is a God. And so first series, we're going to look at the evidence that points to a creator, because in public education, for the most part, people spend time and time reading textbooks about how life came from nothing, how evolution is the truth, and so for believers, people who are raised in church, when we're faced with those scientific questions, it can be quite confusing. Now, I'm not a science teacher. I've taught science, but it's been years ago. I'm not very good at that. But what I've put together in this video series are several clips from people who are scientists, from people who are teachers, from people who just use common sense that help us understand that there is a higher power out there. Because at some point, we all have to come to the realization that something came from nothing, and that there is a God who exists outside of time, space, and matter that created everything. Because if you believe in the Big Bang, well, what happened before the Big Bang? What created the rock that they teach that the rock was as small as the end of like an eraser on a pencil, and some force of energy caused it to detonate, and that's how we get the universe that we have. Something along those lines. I'm probably not saying it exactly right, but it's absurd because it keeps leaving the question. You keep following it backwards, and you'll learn that at some point there has to be a creator to cause all these things to take place. So what I'm going to do, I've got several different people I'm going to show you clips from, and then in the next video series, we're going to look at which God is real, which one do we believe in. And there is so much evidence in the Word of God, in the Bible, the Christian faith, that points to Jesus being divine, points that Jesus is God, that they are one and the same and dwelt here amongst us. So that's in our second part. So this first part, we're going to look at all the evidence that points to there being a creator.
Oh my gosh, just look at this.
Science has in fact discovered God, and you can talk to the hardline atheists and they will say, it looks like science has indeed discovered God. How are we going to have this idea, is there a God or not? Notice that the creation force isn't the three-letter word God. If you look at the words carefully, it's a quantum fluctuations. So look what science has discovered. We can create the universe from absolute nothing, provided we have the forces of nature. Now, the laws of nature, the forces of nature aren't physical, they act on the physical. So if they create the universe, that means they predate the universe. So now we have a set of forces, we call them the laws of nature, that are not physical, that are able to act on the physical. They create the physical from absolute nothing. And they predate the universe, which means they predate our understanding of time. Put that together, it sounds very familiar. If you haven't noticed it, that's the biblical definition of God. There's only one nuance that's left hanging. We can talk about it another time perhaps. It's that which created the universe, those forces active in the universe. But up to that point, science says you are correct. The definition of the biblical God is predates time, outside of time. God is not a physical being, is a force, and it creates the universe. You'll notice that the opening chapter of Genesis, the only name for God is Elohim, God as manifest in the universe.
So here you have it. You have a guy who is explaining how science actually points to there being a God. Science wasn't created to disprove God. It's right the opposite. Science, the study of science and how the universe, all that works, it is to prove that there is a creator, that there is a higher power at work. So there's a guy that I use a lot, that I have a lot of respect for. His name's Kent Hovind. He's a creation scientist. He taught, I believe it was high school science or middle school science, and he's done a lot of study, and he's got lots of evidence. There's stuff all over the internet. He's got his own website that if you have any questions about where do dinosaurs come from, or how did the first 6 days of creation, how did that work? And he is an amazing teacher to help you understand that. But I'm gonna have a lot of clips from him. But this clip, he's debating an atheist professor. They have this debate from the whole school, and there's a format they have to follow, asking one question and both sides get an opportunity to respond. So this is an excerpt from one of those debates he had with a with an atheist professor.
We're supposed to do one question at a time. Which one would you like? That was part of the format for the debate. So which question?
I want you to fill in the story of the rest of the beginning of the universe. God, spiritual matter, impact on material matter.
Okay, so 2 questions. All right.
Go ahead.
All right, your question, where did God come from, assumes that you're thinking of the wrong, obviously it displays that you're thinking of the wrong God, because the God of the Bible is not affected by time, space, or matter. If he's affected by time, space, or matter, he's not God. Time, space, and matter is what we call a continuum. All of them have to come into existence at the same instant, because if there were matter but no space, where would you put it? If there were matter and space but no time, when would you put it? You cannot have time, space, or matter independently. They have to come into existence simultaneously. The Bible answers that in 10 words. In the beginning, there's time. God created the heaven, there's space, and the earth. There's matter. So you have time, space, matter created, a trinity of trinities there. Just, time is past, present, future. Space has length, width, height. Matter has solid, liquid, gas. You have a trinity of trinities created instantaneously. And the God who created them has to be outside of them. If he's limited by time, he's not God. The guy who created this computer is not in the computer. He's not running around in there changing the numbers on the screen, okay? The God who created this universe is outside of the universe. He's above it, beyond it, in it, through it. He's unaffected by it. So the concept that a spiritual force cannot have any effect on a material body, well then I guess you'd have to explain to me things like emotions and love and hatred and envy and jealousy and rationality. I mean, if your brain is just a random collection of chemicals that form by chance over billions of years, how on earth can you trust your own reasoning processes and the thoughts that you think? Okay, so your question, where did God come from, is assuming a limited God. And that's your problem. The God that I worship is not limited by time, space, or matter. If I could fit the infinite God in my 3-pound brain, he would not be worth worshiping, that's for certain. So that's the God that I worship. Thank you.
So this next excerpt from Kent Hovind is a little bit longer. If you're not into science, it can be a little bit boring. But if you have a friend, or again, if you're trying to, in yourself, discover that there is a creator, I think it's important that you watch this. This again goes in more depth of evidence for God.
Now, nobody knows how a mixture of lifeless chemicals spontaneously organize themselves into the first living cell. Paul Davies said, nobody has a clue how life got started from non-living material by itself. There is not even a good theory how it can happen, but the textbooks are going to teach your kids it just happened, okay? They just tell them, hey, it happened. And you can't even consider the option that maybe God made it. Here's what happened. Back in the 50s, 2 guys, Miller and Urey, decided to figure out how life evolved. So they took a mixture of chemicals and ran it through these tubes and tried to create life in the laboratory. The experiment's been duplicated many, many times. Always been a failure. And always created more problems for the evolutionist. This textbook says, although he never proved how life originated, he did add evidence to the theory that life could have started by itself. That is a lie. All they did was create problems for the idea that life could have started by itself. This one says, swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. Boy, it sure is. It don't even happen. That's how slow it is. There are several different articles that say life came from clay. Yep, got some clay together and poof, came alive on the bottom of the ocean. They did not address the origin of life in Darwin's book, and it's never been figured out since how life could have started. What he did is he took these 4 chemicals and put them in these glass tubes, made them circulate around, and tried to create life in the laboratory. This textbook says, many important events occurred during the Archean era, the most important of which was the evolution of life. Progress from complex molecules to the simplest living organism was a very long process. I guess so. If you give it billions of years, somehow it looks more reasonable, you know. This one says, the first living cells emerged between 4 billion and 3.8 billion years ago. There is no record of the event. But you better believe it, and you're going to be tested on it. The first self-replicating systems must have emerged in this organic soup. So great-great-great-great-grandpa was soup. This is one of the lies in the textbooks you kids have to face. Nobody has a clue how life could have gotten started by non-living chemicals. Even Haeckel confessed, he's the guy we talked about in the last session, that made up the idea that the embryo has gill slits, you know, so they could justify abortion. Haeckel said, he claimed that spontaneous generation must be true, not because it had been proven in the laboratory, but because otherwise it would be necessary to believe in a creator. Well, Ernst, I'm sorry, bud, that's just the way it goes. Okay, there's a creator, whether you like it or not. Okay, so have they really produced life in the laboratory? Oh, they haven't even come close. Here's what they did. They took 4 gases. They took methane, ammonia, water vapor, and hydrogen, ran them through these tubes, ran it through a spark chamber supposed to simulate lightning. And say, we're going to put them together and make life in the laboratory. At the bottom of the flask, they got this red goo, and they kept draining the goo off, because if it went through the spark again, it would destroy it. So they had to make the goo and then save it from the next spark, okay? They said in the textbook here it was rich in amino acids, this red goo was. Well, that's simply a lie, okay? They didn't come close to making life. The problem is they had a reducing atmosphere. In other words, he excluded oxygen. You can look at his 4 gases. There's no oxygen there. He knew if he had oxygen in there, it would oxidize whatever chemicals tried to combine. You know, you cut a banana open and lay it on the table, it turns brown, it oxidizes. You don't paint your car, and it oxidizes, it rusts. Well, living cells will oxidize quickly in the presence of oxygen. So he didn't put any oxygen in there. That creates a serious problem, because if you have oxygen, you cannot get life to come from non-living chemicals. The problem is ozone is made from oxygen, and ozone blocks UV light, and UV light destroys ammonia, and ammonia is one of the 4 gases he's got. So you cannot get life to evolve with oxygen, and you cannot get life to evolve without oxygen. Because if you don't have oxygen, you don't have ozone, and now your ammonia gets destroyed. It's just not going to work either way. And the earth has always had oxygen, even more than today. This guy said, what evidence is there for a primitive methane, ammonia atmosphere on earth? The answer is there is no evidence for it, but much against it. We find in general no evidence in the sedimentary distribution of carbon, sulfur, uranium, etc., of that an oxygen-free atmosphere ever existed on the earth. If somebody tells you the early earth had a reducing atmosphere, you tell them Kent Hovind said they're confused or they're deliberately lying, because it's not true. The earth has always had oxygen. This article said, it's suggested from the earliest dated rocks at 3.7 billion years ago, earth had an oxygenic atmosphere. They've always known the earth had oxygen, even more than we have today. We covered that on seminar part 2, how the early earth probably had even more oxygen, made them live longer. This textbook says, there was no oxygen on the earth, which is a lie, and then it says the rocks absorbed it. Hello? How can they absorb it if it wasn't there? Well, think about it. Second problem they had with the Miller experiment, they filtered out the product. That is not realistic for nature, okay? They saved the goo from getting sparked the second time because it would have destroyed it. What he actually made in this experiment was 85% tar, 13% carboxylic acid. Now, both of those are poisonous to life. If you make a mixture that's 98% poisonous to the other 2%, I don't think it's logical to say you've succeeded in creating anything that's going to help make life, okay? The problems are he made mostly only 2 amino acids. There are 20 different ones required to make life. 20 different amino acids. Now, these amino acids are kind of like letters of the alphabet, okay? You have to have 26 letters in the English alphabet to make all the words that we have. Well, you have to have 20 different amino acids to make all the proteins that your body has. With those 20 different amino acids, your body can build a bazillion different kinds of proteins. Kind of like you can make a lot of different words with the same 26 letters, okay? What he actually made was a couple of letters, like 2 of the letters of the alphabet, by combining these gases. This creates a real problem since half of them were left-handed and half of them were right-handed. What he actually made was amino acids, only 2 of them, and half of them were backwards. I mean, if I drop letters of the alphabet, there's a 50-50 chance some of them are going to land upside down. They don't do any good. You have to have them all facing the right way. The smallest proteins we know of have about 70 to 100 amino acids, all of them facing the right way. This greatly compounds the problem, okay? DNA and RNA are all right-handed, all other proteins are left-handed. It's a very puzzling fact. All proteins that have been investigated from animals, plants, and higher organisms, and from simple organisms, bacteria, molds, even viruses, are made of left-handed amino acids. They're all that way. So he's really got a problem since half of his letters were backwards. And there are hundreds of amino acids required to combine in just the right way to make a protein, and they unbond in water faster than they bond. And they claim this all happened in the oceans. Well, the oceans are completely full of water, all the way to the bottom. And Brownian motion is going to drive them apart. It's not going to put them together. One of the lies in the textbooks is that they made life in the laboratory. They have all they've done. Every experiment has made the problem worse for the evolutionist, okay? These spontaneous generations do not occur spontaneously in water. Life is not going to get started in this way. There's a whole lot more in the book, Icons of Evolution, if you want a lot more on the subject to go down deep. But they got this weird idea in their head that all they have to do is get all the right chemicals together and then add energy, and it'll make life. Okay, well, let's do an experiment. Let's put a frog in a blender and turn it on. In a matter of moments, you will have frog nog. And you will have all of the chemicals required to make a frog in one blender, right? Then we're going to add energy. You can turn it on puree for 30 minutes. You can nuke it, microwave it, zap it with jumper cables. I don't care what you do. Drop a hand grenade in there. Add all the energy you want, okay? How long will it take to reassemble the frog? It'll never happen. See, just getting the chemicals together isn't the problem. You go to the mortuary, you got a dead body laying there, you got all the chemicals required for life right there in one spot. Bring it back to life. Life is something different. I don't think science has ever defined that clearly. Now,
this next guy, this is not getting over the next one. This next guy is believed to have the highest IQ that's been recorded in modern times. And he, being supposedly the most intelligent person alive today, can sit down, logically explain that there has to be a God. Take a listen.
Does God exist?
Yes.
Simple as
Yes.
that.
Well, it's the identity has the reality has an identity. Okay? The identity is that as which something exists. Okay? Matter of fact, when you say the word reality, you're naming an identity. You're identifying something.
God himself is conscious and therefore personal?
Yes. You can establish a personal relationship with God. We're images of God. You know what an image is? It's basically the product of a mapping. God maps himself into each human being, right? That's a very personal thing that God is doing for us, right? And I don't understand how anybody can say that it's any different. We reflect the structure of the universe. Each one of us, we're carried by it. Everything we do, we exist in a medium. What is that medium? Right? Where did it come from?
Yeah.
What holds it together? What is the unifying coherence, the source of coherence of that medium?
There's a lot of misconceptions as to what evolution is. There's nothing wrong with adaptation. We can observe that. We adapt to our environments. Animals, all of life goes through a process of adapting to their environment. That is not evolution. Evolution, at its definition, it is a change of kind. That would be like a reptile becoming a mammal. That's, I guess, the easiest example to give that. We've never observed that. You cannot scientifically prove that. They'll reference fossil records, things like that. But again, there's a whole nother teaching on how that's not accurate at understanding how old the Earth is and so forth. But this guy discusses evolution and how it's flawed.
I would love to hear you disprove evolution. Can we do that?
If evolution is true, then you go through a progressive evolution, if you will, of these organisms evolving into an increasingly more being-like creature. The problem is there's zero evidence of that. The problem is you have these single-celled organisms and multi-celled organisms, and then there's just a giant gap in the fossil record. And you have animals, and then you have man. But we don't have a fossil record that takes us from single and multi-celled organisms into an entire species. And we just simply ignore that.
Wow.
And so
I didn't know that.
this ecosystem is so intelligent, not in my opinion, but in the scientific evidence, it could not have been put together by accident. It didn't happen by happenstance.
Here's another person explaining why evolution is not, it's not correct. We didn't evolve from some lower primate or some monkey somewhere.
This might be one of the funniest rebuttals on evolution. You have to see this video. Check it out.
Evolution is not real, then why do apes have opposable thumbs?
If my Toyota truck didn't evolve from a Maserati, why do they both have four wheels? Interpreting the opposable thumb through the presupposition of evolution when I just say God created them that way. That's all.
Let me back you up. That is, you're using homology that is the science of similar designs and structures, to say, I assume that came from evolution. You could just as well say, I assume it came from a similar designer. In science, we call that bias. You're bringing your bias to interpret the evidence. Take away your bias, and that's not there.
This next video segment, this next video is confirms that we all come from a common ancestor, from one man and one woman. And again, in the Christian faith and many other faiths, Adam and Eve, those are the first two people, and that's where we believe that we came from. And science actually confirms that we came from one couple, one man, one woman, many years ago.
Recent scientific research provides compelling evidence that all humans share a common ancestry, tracing back to one man and one woman. Studies on mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam suggest that every living person descends from a single maternal and paternal ancestor. Scientists have also discovered that human genetic diversity is unexpectedly low, indicating a significant population bottleneck in the past. This finding aligns with historical records and ancient flood accounts, which describe humanity being reduced to a small group before repopulating the Earth. Additionally, research confirms that the human body is composed of the exact same elements found in the Earth's crust, which aligns with the Genesis account of creation. Even population models, when traced backwards, point to a recent common origin for humanity, with the numbers fitting the Bible far better than evolutionary timelines.
This is the flood. This is today. And starting from those 6 people, all you have to do is double the number of people every 156 years, and you arrive at 7 billion people after 4,500 years. Just about any model that has any growth at all, you can get this many people in those many years. So the human population size actually is a biblical human population size. If evolution was true and we existed for so many thousands of years before that, there should be trillions of people. Not that it's possible.
Now, here's another thing what people get hung up on is that, and I don't personally believe the Earth is millions and billions of years old. I believe in the 6,000-year-old Earth. And I can look at the evidence, and I think that if everyone observed the same evidence that I see and the research I've done, we would all come to the same conclusion that the Earth is only about 6,000, 7,000 years old. And there are some scholars who go back and look at the first few days of creation. They're like, well, it could have lasted millions of years before. There's all this logical stuff they try to throw in there. But there is evidence for a 6,000-year-old Earth.
Proof of a 6,000-year-old Earth. Watch this.
According to the Bible, the Earth is only around 6,000 years old. Is there any evidence to support that?
Indeed there is. The population of the world today is about 8 billion people. Do you know if you start with 6 people, Shem, Ham and Japheth, Noah's 3 sons and their 3 wives, and let that population grow at the rate of about 0.5%, which is very conservative, for 4,500 years, that's how long ago the flood was, we get 8 billion. So the Bible's record of history is exactly consistent with the population of the world. We find soft tissue in dinosaur bones showing that they cannot be millions of years old, including the presence of carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. Once again, consistent with an age of only a few thousand years.
So if the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and we go back and we look at the evidence, this professor was talking about Noah's Ark. And there was Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. And so when the population, you can, again, looking at his figures, his numbers, again, you can prove that the Earth is only about 6,000 years old. Well, that brings into more questions. Well, what about all these ancient civilizations that are supposed to be, tens of thousands of years old? Well, let's look at what the scientists say.
Okay, check this out. Watch this.
What about ancient civilizations that predate the creation timeline?
There are none. So how are you going to date that ancient civilization? Human writing is the only accurate, absolutely accurate evidence that we have to date anything. That is, somebody wrote it down and they wrote their date, which we can connect to our dates. Many people are surprised that we have no datable human writing that predates 2500 BC.
Wow.
None. Absolutely zero. Once you leave human writing behind, now you're going to carbon-14 and pottery records and all the assumptions that go into that. Carbon-14 dating, which dates things that are alive, bones or plants, all right, which would include papyrus, they are not older than the biblical record.
So you can see it all makes sense, right? So I mean, again, if you've been struggling with faith and trying to believe in something bigger than yourself, but all your professors and your science teachers are telling you that there is no such thing as God. Well, I look at the same evidence or the same data, or I look at the data and I can prove just right the opposite, that there is a higher creator. We have one more video I'm gonna share with you, and again, it's a little bit longer, but it's from Kent Hovind. Just about the teachings in school and science. So check this clip out.
We're not against science, but I'm against poison mixed in with the science. That's all. Here's a first grade textbook. I'll show you what I'm talking about. They tell the kids in first grade, Earth has changed much since its formation 4.5 billion years ago. Now just hold on a minute. Is the Earth 4.5 billion years old? No, as we'll see in a minute. But if you tell that to a first grader, he's going to believe you. First graders believe everything you tell them. They believe bananas are moldy spider legs. I did. And then tell them again in second grade. Since its formation 4.5 billion years ago, Earth has changed. Down at the bottom it says, life too has evolved on Earth. This word evolved is a very tricky word. I've done over 90 debates and about 7,000 radio and TV call-in talk shows, and I've learned how to win the debate on evolution in the first 5 minutes. It is so easy. If somebody says, do you believe in evolution? I say, well, what do you mean? Well, you know, evolution. No, which one are you talking about? There are 6 meanings to the word. Are you talking about cosmic evolution, the origin of time, space, matter? I don't believe in that, with the Big Bang. We'll talk about that in a minute. Are we talking about chemical evolution? Because according to the Big Bang theory, the Big Bang, you know, produced hydrogen and maybe some helium. Well, then how did we get all these other elements? You want me to believe uranium evolved from hydrogen? They'll say, well, yeah, fusion. You have fusion in stars. Yeah, but you can't fuse past iron very well. Number 2, you got a chicken and an egg problem here, because you have to have the stars to make the elements and the elements to make the stars. Which one came first? Which brings up, of course, stellar evolution. How did the stars form? You know, nobody's ever seen a star form. Scientists don't even have a clue how a star could form. No even good theories about star formation. We cover more on that on video 7. But we see stars blow up all the time. It's called a nova or a supernova if it's a big one. That happens all the time. But we never see one form. And yet there's enough stars out there that we know about that everybody on planet Earth, every single individual, can personally own 11 trillion stars to yourself. Those are the ones we know about. We don't know about the ones that we don't know about. Fourthly, there's going to have to be organic evolution. Life has to get started from non-living material. Nobody has a clue how that could happen. Then we're going to have what's called macroevolution. That's where an animal changes to a different kind of animal. But you know, nobody has ever seen a dog produce a non-dog. Never. You may get a big dog or a little dog, but you're going to get a dog every time. And it could be that the dog, the wolf, and the coyote had a common ancestor. I wouldn't argue about that. They probably did. But every 5-year-old kid knows they're the same kind of animal. I'll show you. Is anybody in here 5 or 6? Who's 5 or 6 years old? Anybody? How about, we got one? Oh, okay. How old are you, buddy? 6? I want you to take a test. Here we have a dog, a wolf, a coyote, and a banana. Which one is different than the rest of them? The banana. Give him a hand. All right. Very good. We have college professors can't figure that out, okay? Tell you what I want you to do. When we're done, I want you to go out to the table out in the hallway and you can pick out any free video or DVD you want. Okay? We got a bunch of videos and DVDs about dinosaurs and stuff out there. The Bible says the animals are going to bring forth after their kind. Now, Charlie Darwin wrote a book on the table down here called Origin of Species. See, a dog and a wolf are the same kind of animal, but they're different species. He fooled everybody by changing the word from kind to species. We'll get into more of that on video 4. Lastly, we have what is called microevolution. This is changes within the kinds. Now that one happens. I'll go along with number 6. I think animals can produce a whole variety of offspring. You know, long hair, long-legged, short-legged. That happens. But the first 5 are purely religious. It's not science. We never observe any of those. So if you want to win the debate on evolution, simply define exactly what you're talking about. And you'll find all they ever give are examples of number 6, which there's no argument about it. It happens. But then they imply that that is somehow magically evidence for the other 5, and it is not. The teachers are taught, though, be sure to stress to the students that the earth is billions of years old. Make sure the kids believe this. Now, I happen to be a little old-fashioned. I think in science class we should be teaching science. Things we can observe and study and test and demonstrate. Things like the first law of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics tells us matter cannot be created or destroyed. Well, everything's made out of matter, so if matter cannot be created or destroyed, then how did the world get here? We're here, you know. So that leaves only 2 choices. Somebody made the world, or the world made itself. There's no other choice. Well, there are a few out there on the lunatic fringe who will tell you, we're not really here at all. We just think we're here. Okay, you can forget about those folks, all right? We're here. So either somebody made the world like the Bible says, God created it, or the world just made itself like the humanists believe. It just is self-existing and not created. Well, if the world just made itself, how could this happen? Boy, the devil thought about that for a long time, and finally one day he came up with the Big Bang Theory. How many of you have ever heard of the Big Bang Theory before? I was on the airplane years ago flying from Dallas to San Francisco, and I happened to sit right next to a professor from Berkeley, UCal Berkeley. I don't know if you folks in Knoxville have ever heard of Berkeley or not, but Berkeley is not a Bible college. So here I was on the airplane about that far away from this guy, and we started talking about creation and evolution. Everybody I sit by on the airplane wants to talk about that, so I talk about it with him. And he said he believed in evolution. I said, yes, sir, I figured that. You have to teach at Berkeley. I said, tell me, sir, if you believe in evolution, how did the world get here? He said, oh, it came from the Big Bang. I said, really? I'd like to hear about this. He said, you're a science teacher and you have never heard of the Big Bang? I said, oh, yes, sir, I've heard a lot about the Big Bang. And I believe in the Big Bang, but my Big Bang is a lot different than yours. I said, you tell me about your Big Bang, and then I'll tell you about my Big Bang. And so the professor took off on one of those answers that looked like it came straight from the textbook. He said, well, Mr. Hovind, I believe about 18 or 20 billion years ago. That's a long time. All the matter in the universe. That's a lot of stuff. By the way, the word universe comes from 2 Latin words, uni, which means single, and verse, which means a spoken sentence. Did you know we live in a single spoken sentence? God said, let there be. Now that'll preach, man. There's a sermon in there someplace right there, okay? And if your pastor can't find it, he ain't got no preach in him at all, okay? All the matter in the universe was concentrated into one very dense, very hot region that may have been much smaller than a period on this page. Say what? Everything in the universe squished into a dot smaller than a period on a page? Wow. That's one crowded dot. And heavy, too. And it ain't the first time it happened, boys and girls. This textbook says, someday after many billions of years, all the matter and energy will once again be packed into a small area, no larger than the period at the end of this sentence. Then another Big Bang will occur. It happens every 80 to 100 billion years. Can you believe they cut down a tree to print that? Where's Al Gore when you need him? That's what I want to know. Yeah. And why did you guys send Al Gore to Washington? You had him here, you know. But no. This textbook author was brilliant. I could not believe how smart this guy was. He said, boys and girls, nothing really means nothing. You have to be at least that smart to write a book. He said not only matter and energy would disappear, but also space and time. However, physicists theorized that from the state of nothingness, the universe began in a gigantic explosion. What? Yes, boys and girls, you see, one day nothing exploded. And here we are. We could spend 3 days talking about the Big Bang Theory. They used to say the thing that exploded was a few light years in diameter. Then they said, oh no, it's only 275 million miles. And they said, oh no, it's only 71 million miles. They keep getting it smaller, and now they're saying nothing exploded. Wow, Discover magazine here a couple years ago said, where did everything come from? Boys and girls, the universe burst into something from absolutely nothing. Zero, nada. As it got bigger, it became filled with even more stuff that came from absolutely nowhere. How is that possible? Ask Alan Guth. His theory will explain everything. Wow, I've got to meet this Alan Guth guy. Alan Guth said in Scientific American, the observable universe could have evolved from an infinitesimal region. In the Hebrew, that's a dot. He said it's then tempting to go one step further and speculate that the entire universe evolved from literally nothing. You see, boys and girls, we all came from a dot, and the dot came from nothing. And they call that science? And put it in a science journal? I think I'd call that a fairy tale and put it in the garbage.
So I hope this helps you, this first video. Again, do your own research. You know, just because you're a Christian, you don't have to leave your brain at the door when you go to church. I mean, God created everything. And again, if you truly get in and you research and you search, you'll see that there has to be a creator. So the next video we're going to look at, we're going to go into the details. We're going to talk about why the Bible is accurate, why Jesus is the only way. So check that out on the next video series.